I'm Jonas Galvez. I'm a lead JavaScript developer at HelloPrint and a former Nuxt.js core contributor. If you have been following me, you know that I have been working on fastify-vite, which is a Fastify plugin for running Vite client applications. I just released a new beta version of fastify-vite, and it represents a radical departure from its original implementation, as well as it introduces some new concepts. And I thought it would be better to go over these concepts and these changes in a proper screencast as opposed to just having text release notes. Even though I'm not very good at it, as it will probably become clear, I thought I would give it a shot and go over these things in a video anyway. So I would like to revisit the bigger picture that I have, and for that I'm going to mention that I have another video that's building a full stack framework with Fastify from 3 weeks ago. If you search for my name, Jonas Galvez, Fastify, IBM, you're gonna be led straight to it as the first result, or I think. Should be easy to find anyways. So revisiting the bigger picture, which is to have a full stack framework built entirely on Fastify plugins. So the idea is to abandon the need for full stack frameworks, specialized full stack frameworks for SSR, and just use Fastify and Vite. And with fastify-vite, you can do that already. Even though I wouldn't say it's production ready, it works. So right now we have three modules, three Fastify plugins, which are fastify-vite, fastify-vite view, and fastify-vite react. The latter two are actually components that support fastify-vite, as it will become clear in a bit. So I'm calling this effort the Terex framework, and I place framework under quotes because I don't really want it to be a framework. I want everything to be just a Fastify plugin or a Vite plugin. I want a transparent, clean architecture with no magic folders like .next or .next, with tight API integration out of the box, and if it ever matures to be a proper open source project and not just a pet project of mine, as it currently is, I want the same open governance principles from Fastify. So no real framework, just flavors. And what are flavors? Flavors are just boilerplates. The idea is to use dgit, which is a tool you can install globally via npm, to directly pull from GitHub. So right now there are two available flavors for testing, the Vue API flavor and the React API flavor. And these are actually just straight copies from the examples folder from fastify-vite plugin. So I have this changelog for the latest release. This is what will probably go eventually into the proper release notes for the project. But going over it really quickly, I refactored the core to register one server route per client route. So this is the key architecture change that makes 2.2 radically different from previous implementations. I refactored the data fetching API into get data and get payload. I will go over this in a bit. And I refactored the setup into a multi-package one, so that's why we have now fastify-vite, fastify-vite view, and fastify-vite react. So these are the new packages. When we use Terex.js framework, the repository on GitHub, this is like a convenience repository just to accommodate the basic boilerplate that uses these packages. So when you do dgit Terex.js framework vAPI or React API, we're going to be using these packages. So I'm going to go ahead and get those installed now. So I have this folder called Playground. I'm gonna go here and install the React and Vue versions. So for Vue, I wanna have my Vue app. And for React, I wanna have my React app. So let me open that on Sublime so I have it easy. So in here we have the two example folders. Applications, but let's go back to the presentation for now. So this is the basic server boilerplate. You register fastify-vite and you register a rendered plugin. In this case, you have React, and you can see that you have the entry points pointing to JSX files, and for the Vue version, you have it pointed to JS files. So this new release introduces this feature where you are able to use the load routes helper to automatically manipulate the result of glob eager. This is provided by Vite. So it uses this utility provided by Vite to actually go into all files in the directory, and it will manipulate then in a way that's able to be understood both by Vue and Fastify, or React and Fastify. So you have the same exact API for doing that. And you can also just return a manually set list of routes, but there are some benefits to using load routes, as will become clear in a bit. So this is one of the key features that's introduced by this new release. If we go to the example apps that are generated, you can see that there is a Vue folders on both the React example and the Vue example. They look pretty much the same. It's the same files, the same setup. It's just really Vue from React. That's all the difference. So for instance, on data fetching, you can see that you have get data in here, and data fetching in Vue, you also have get data. And for payload, you also have get payload on the React version and get payload on the Vue version. And to specify the routes, you just have to export a path property, and Fastify will pick that up and will automatically register the route. So if you don't have this is actually a prerequisite to using the load routes. You can't export a manually set of routes, but then you're going to have to provide the paths yourself. So going back to the presentation, so there's a new standardized way to access global data, and that comes from fastify-vite global, and it's in Vue. It's made available in global properties or via use hydration, which is a new hook introduced by fastify-vite. In here you can see the example of accessing directly via Vue, and in here you can see the example for accessing through React. Both use hydration has the core concept to work with. So this new release also introduces the ability to export route hooks via exports. So in here you can see that I'm exporting a Fastify on request hook for this Vue component. It will automatically be executed, be registered and executed, and whatever you place under rec data will be automatically hydrated on the client for first render, as long as you use hydration. So the new version, this beta version, also introduces two concepts for working with data fetching. One is get payload, the other is get data. Get payload will automatically register an API route that you can use to get the page's contents. It will automatically come hydrated from the server during first render. But it also exposes a payload path helper that you can use to retrieve updated versions of the endpoint. So this is one of the things that it's made possible with fastify-vite. The other is get data. Get data ensures that the same function runs on the server on the client, with the exception that it won't run on the client after first render, and will just hydrate instead. So this is actually a bit more advanced. It integrates with Fastify API and Manifetch, which are two libraries provided that are part of the Terex initiative to automatically build API clients based on server routes. So I'm gonna go over those examples now. So for the automatically payload endpoint, you can see that you can export a get payload function. That get payload function expects context parameter where you have access to the fastify request object or the repli object, API, and anything else that, including fastify itself. So you get automatic dependency injection and server only injection. So if you have fastify reference in the context, you can be sure that that's only going to be available on the server. And this is what get payload does. This function will always run on the server. So let's go into the example. So this is how it knows that it's using get payload. When you use hydration, you pass get payload to it, and it will know that you're using a payload. And here's the example of using a payload path to automatically refresh the payload contents, to manually refresh the payload contents. So let's go into the example to see what's doing in detail. So I'm gonna go here to my React app. I'm going to install dependencies. Should be really quick. Now I can run npm run dev. It's gonna start the development server. Let's go here. Here we have all the examples that I'm talking about. Let's go into route payload. So what happens when I navigate to a route, to this route payload route view? You can see the source here. What's going to happen is that since it's client-side navigation, it knows that it's supposed to do a request to the server to actually get the payload, and it's going to automatically do that. If we open the developer tools, you're going to see under network tab that when you go to route payload, it's actually doing an HTTP request to //payload route payload. And this is coming with the JSON that we expect. It also works for SSR, straight SSR. In this case, it comes hydrated. And in here, we have the manual snippet to automatically to update the payload. So if we click here, it switches to loading, and you can see it happening here. So use hydration actually returns an update function that you can use to update a global state for the page, so to speak. In this case, you can set loading to true and to false. And in here, you see the loading. And here you see the actual rendering of the message. So for get payload, the key thing to understand is that this function is only going to run on the server. We can run it from the client, but it's always going to be through an API that's automatically registered. In this case, the payload API. So we can execute this piece of code from the client via an API that's automatically registered. This is what the route payload example tries to demonstrate. So going back to our presentation, the other feature that this release introduces is isomorphic data fetching. So if you export a get data function from your view components, now, differently from the other one, get payload, this function can actually run both on the client and the server. So this is where the tight integration to API comes from, because if you use Fastify API, which is part of the boilerplate, then your API methods are going to be available on the server and on the client. On the server, they're going to trigger direct route handler execution. There's no need for an extra HTTP request. And if it happens on the client, there's going to be an API client request. So that's all automatically generated by using Fastify API and Fastify and Moneyfetch, which are the supporting libraries for this setup. So you can see this in data fetching here. Let's go to the example. isomorphic API. The same thing will happen here. So if you navigate to it, it will automatically make a request. This request is happening from the client on this call, and if you access it straight via SSR, you get the same, but has a result from the server library that's making those requests. It includes a few more headers and data, but it's essentially repeating the same API request. So this call right here happens exactly the same way, nearly exactly the same way on the server and on the client. And as you can see, API echo is coming automatically generated from this thing right here, which is the Fastify API plugin that allows you to set reusable API methods, and you automatically get an API manifesto that's used to generate an API client. And you can see more details about it here. Terex.js manifetch. You can see the library that's used to make this possible. So going back to our presentation, on roadmap, since my previous presentation, on the roadmap was the intention to support React. That is now done. I have refactored use server data from the previous releases into get data and get payload. So that's also done. Right now, we need to have a Terex CLI, we need interceptors, we need to support Astro as an alternative to Vite, and there are so many things that need attention, but I really need more people looking into it and giving it a shot. So hopefully this presentation will be enough to make you curious and willing to give it a try. Thank you for watching.